Good evening and namaste, everyone. So, on behalf of Sri Aurobindo Society, as well as the Sri Aurobindo Integral Life Center, Auro University, it is my pleasure to welcome you all for, I guess, our session number 13th or 14th. I forget the number, but we have been exploring various expressions of art and how they are, how they can provide a kind of like a spiritual aesthetic experience through both the process of creation of the art and the consumption, the rasa that we take from the art. So last week we had architecture, and this week we are jumping to literature. It's really going with the Indian way, where all arts are integrated so well together. So today, to facilitate this discussion on that sort of juxtaposes literature with the spiritual experience, we have with us Dr. Ravi Bhushan ji. So I'm just going to briefly introduce our speaker for the day. He's an alumnus of Madras University, and he's been a teacher of English language and literature at Bhagat Phul Singh Mahila Vishwavidyalaya in Sonipat, Haryana for several years. He has authored a reference book on William Golding and has been the co-editor for 2 books, Affinities, India and Korea, Past and Present, and Mekong Ganga Axis. He's also co-translated a book on the languages of Haryana, titled Bharatiya Bhasha Lok Sarvekshan, Haryana Ki Bhashaएं, Volume 10, which has been published by Orient Black Swan. And his areas of interests basically include English language teaching, cognitive semantics, communication theories, oral literature, and comparative literature. And today he's going to speak to us about this very interesting topic, imagining bliss, creation, and knowledge in literature, a spiritual interpretation. But somehow I think it sounds much more beautiful when you say it in Hindi. साहित्य में आनंद सृजन और ज्ञान की कल्पना, आध्यात्मिक विवेचना. So I hope we will be able to, I don't know, you're planning to give this talk in English or Hindi, but both are welcome, or a combination is welcome. So look forward to listening to you and learning about how this literary experience juxtaposes with the imagination of bliss and creativity in literature. Please, the forum is all yours, sir. Welcome.
Thank you, Beluji. Respected Dr. Kiran, Director SAILC, respected Belu Mehraji, esteemed listeners who are there with us in the meeting, a very good evening. Indeed, it's a great pleasure for me. In fact, it's a privilege for me that I've been invited to participate in these excellent, wonderful, rare discourses which take place generally on Wednesdays. And today I've been invited to speak on the topic which Beluji described to all of you. Now, I think the tone has been set by the invocation which we heard in the beginning itself, that takes us to the realm of spirituality, those beautiful, I could say those expressions which were trying to mesmerize us with this world of spirituality, and which leads to creation, knowledge, and of course, honor. I'll be bilingual during my talk. I'll be using English and Hindi both. I think that's okay with the listeners. Now, the context of my talk, primarily, like why this kind of a thing came to my mind is basically today's youth. Everything was planned keeping our youth in the mind. I'm of the opinion that our youth has lost love for our literature, for our languages, and for our philosophy. हमारे अपने साहित्य, अपनी भाषाएं और अपना दर्शन, उनको जानने की, समझने की, सीखने की जो प्रवृत्ति थी, जो टेंडेंसी थी, I think that's on way. So basically that was the context to have this kind of a thing. Second reason for having this talk, or the reason for titling this talk this way, was the context of modernity, or if I could say post-modernity, that too, the idea of post-truth. Now, this particular concept of post-truth, which came into being into 2016, and in fact, Oxford University Press or Oxford Dictionary declared it as a word of the year, and they included it in their dictionary. Now, post-truth, you may take it that it's an antonym of truth. No, it's not an antonym of truth. ये truth का विपरीतार्थक नहीं है. Post-truth is something else. I have my understanding of post-truth this way, that this post-truth is a state of affairs where habits or feelings and impressions, rather than facts, they become more influential in shaping public opinion. That means facts are displaced by habits, feelings, and impressions. Or, if I could use one word, by rhetorics. That means rhetorics displace the very idea of truth or very idea of fact. So that was the second reason for titling my talk this way. First one was today's youth. That means they're losing interest in their own literature, own languages, and own philosophy. Second, this notion of post-truth. I think that made me to title this talk this way. Now, the key words of my talk are, as the title indicates, literature becomes one of the main categories. Spirituality, of course, is another key word. Then third key word is Anand. Now, I'm including knowledge and creation in this broader category of Anand. Now, so literature, spirituality, and Anand. Though I have translated my title in English, replacing Anand with bliss, I don't agree with myself, because bliss may not be an equivalent word for, or equivalent expression for Anand. In fact, there is no equivalent expression for Anand as far as the concept goes. So I'll prefer calling it as Anand. So to begin with, what is literature? I think it's an age-old question. We all teachers of literature and languages have been asking this question, have been grappling with this question. All our intellectuals have grappled with this question of what is literature. Now, there can be a number of definitions. Without going into those definitions, let us understand this word through Indian tradition of knowledge, which is Virodh Marg. Now, what is Virodh Marg? This idea of contesting something with an alternate. That is Virodh Marg. Or if I could use another concept from Vedas, which is Neti Neti. Neti Neti means not this, something else. Now, literature and known literature. I'm using these two broad categories. Known literature would indicate all scientific domains, and literature would indicate all liberal arts or humanist arts, and maybe, of course, that includes aesthetics as well. Now, literature to me is superior to non-literature. I'm saying it not because I'm a student of literature, but as an individual, as a person who experiences life, I say that literature is superior to non-literature in the sense that we have two things, two main elements in literature. That is bhav and vichar. Now, bhav means your feelings, your thoughts, and vichar means your ideas, right? That is vichar. Vichar is a property of non-literature or science as well, because science is based on this very notion of vichar or idea. But it is literature which really juxtaposes both bhav and vichar. For example, all our literary expositions, all our literary expressions of our intellectual masters, to begin with Vedas and to the 20th century, all those thoughts which have been expressed, I think they include both the essence of an idea and the associated feeling or associated sentiment with it. So bhav and vichar, I think, constitute literature, number one. Number two, literature has been, it has been understood, as I said earlier, in different ways. And there have been debates that what is the role of literature in life of human beings. And that's why there have been two broad categories, two broad thoughts, two broad schools to answer this question. One school was a very old nomenclature, that art for art's sake. I think I said it in the last lecture as well, and the art for social change, or art for didactic purposes. So art for art's sake, which constitute the aesthetic category, and art for social change, which constitutes didactic category of literature. Right. Now, because we all subscribe to philosophies which suit us, we all subscribe to ideas which suit us. Similarly, there have been writers who subscribed to art for art's sake. There have been writers who subscribed to art for social change or didactic role of literature. People like Munshi Premchand, a well-known Hindi writer, he subscribed to the didactic role of literature, not the art for art's sake, because he brought in the context of India as an underdeveloped nation or underdeveloped country, where poverty, discrimination, exploitation, जहाँ पे रोटी कपड़ा और मकान की ही चिंता हो, वहां पे आर्ट फॉर आर्ट से को आप कैसे लाओ? ये उनका आर्ग्यूमेंट. He said literature is to examine life. The critical examination of life is literature. And according to him, this didactic role of literature critically examines life. That's why Munshi Premchand, he used two words to sum up his argument, I think, in his magazine Mansarovar. And he said, there are two ideas. One is literature, one is propaganda. Propaganda is a word which fits very, very aptly in the post-truth world. Propaganda, according to Premchand, uproots a society gradually. It uproots. It creates disruptions in society, and gradually it demolishes the social fabric. That is propaganda. That could be done through rhetorics as maybe a way of. But literature, according to Premchand, it simply means that, if I could say, कि मैं हिंदी में इसको कहूँ, साहित्य में जन कल्याण और आनंद की भावना होना बहुत जरूरी है. जन कल्याण और आनंद की भावना साहित्य को साहित्य बनाता है. अगर मैं ये कहूँ, साहित्य तीन चीजों का मिश्रण है: दर्शन, वर्णन और करुणा. Darshan is philosophy, an idea, a thought. Varnan, explanation, that critical examination. As I said, Virod Marg. Okay. I think it has become a fashion these days to call all our ancient texts maybe either obsolete, maybe rudimentary, maybe backward. But to me, I think they were the most modern texts. Let's take an example of Vedas. See, Vedas propagate the idea of debate and discussion. Vedas ये कहते हैं प्रज्ञा, प्रज्ञा का मतलब होता है नॉलेज, प्रज्ञा का मतलब है इंटेलिजेंस. प्रज्ञा is a product of three things. It is uh, manast, means meditate करना किसी चीज, then विमर्श करना, debate करना, discuss करना, argue करना, and third one is प्रयोग, उसको behavioral experience की तरह उसको life में भी उसको use करना. ये तीन चीजों को मिलकर बनता है प्रज्ञा. तो debate and discussion have been prominent categories in our ancient text. Ideas were propounded using debates and discussions. So how can such texts be maybe rudimentary or maybe something else, right? So darshan, varnan and karuna, I think a very, very important category in literature, which takes us to spirituality as well. Karuna means sense of compassion for fellow beings, for people who are with us or with whom we are. So now look at this beautiful combination of darshan, varnan, and karuna. That is literature. Now, another aspect of literature is, I think it was Aurobindo who said, आनंद की प्राप्ति के तीन स्रोत हो सकते हैं. There can be three sources of anand. One is intellectual, another is physical, and third one is spiritual. Intellectual, physical, and spiritual. Now this intellectual joy, I think literature enables us to have this intellectual joy. Physical is about materialism of life, right? And then spiritual, which is another aspect, or we can say the extension, or we could say which is obtained through literary expositions. So having said it, now let me now say what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to define for you the role of literature. I'm not saying that out of the two categories, which one is relevant or which one is irrelevant. That art for art's sake or art for social change or didactic purposes. But the fundamental role of literature in life is to raise four questions. And those four questions are perennial. They are universal questions. Question number one, which literature raises, is it talks about our genesis, our origin. That is the first, you can say, question which is raised by literature. Second, it raises the question of our destination. That means, where are we heading to? Third, it talks about our actions. And fourth, it talks about the reasons for our actions. Four questions: origin, destination, actions, and reasons for our actions. Srimad Bhagavad Gita is an excellent example of literary exposition or literary text which tries to answer these four questions. So I would say Bhagavad Gita is a literary masterpiece which juxtaposes both the literariness as well as the spiritual element of literature, right? Another thing, literature, now I think because I started with post-truth, literature basically establishes truth. The prime purpose of literature is to establish truth. But the problem is, what is truth? Truth है क्या? किसको बोलते हैं? मैं आपको एक एग्जांपल दूं. Yudhishthir in Mahabharata said, Aswathama Athoha. Aswathama Mara gaya. Further he said, Naro va Kunjaro va. Naro va Kunjaro va. Means नर था कि हाथी था, ये नहीं बताया, but Aswathama Hatoha. Now, if some of you could tell me, did Yudhishthir tell lie or Yudhishthir told truth? Aswathama Hatoha. That was the statement. Aswathama Mara Gaya. मैं उसको simplify करके बोलता हूँ, Aswathama. Now, you may say that Yudhishthir did not tell lie. ये तो सच्ची घटना है महाभारत में, अश्वत्थामा तो मारा गया, अश्वत्थामा हाथी तो मारा गया, right? Now, but if I say Yudhishthir lied, he did not tell the truth, that is also acceptable proposition as far as the idea of truth is concerned. See, what is truth? Truth is absence of deceit is truth. Absence of deceit. When Yudhishthir said, Aswathama mara gaya, you may agree or disagree, but there is an element of deceit in this statement. That's why it is not an example of truth. It would be categorized as untruth or a lie, because the intention is more important. So literature talks about two types of truth. An Indian tradition or Indian philosophy of literature, it says Rat and Sat. Now, Sat is the factual truth, but Rat is the value truth. The element of value has to be there in truthful expression. If there is no value, or if there is an element of deceit in the statement, won't be considered as truth. The real job of literature is to establish truth. But literature of post-truth or propaganda, as Premchand said, would bring in this element of deceit, or maybe using language in a manipulative way, would try to establish truth. So, based on this idea of value truth, I think that is the Indian or the Indic understanding of literature. Now, let's move on, because we have limited time. We don't have unlimited time with us. I hope, as far as literature or the concept of literature is concerned, I'm quite clear on what literature is, right? Moving on to the next category, which is spirituality. There is another word. People may mistake religion with spirituality. At times get confused with religion, dharma, and spirituality. Right? Now, first, let's take religion and dharma. See, English version of word dharma is religion. Again, I say, it is not an equivalent. If there are translators in this group, they may know that equivalence and untranslatability are the two problems of translation. Untranslatability and equivalence. These are the two problems or barriers in translation. And there is no answer to them, right? So now let's make a distinction, because we are when we talk of spirituality, we are concerned with dharma, not with religion. Now, religion, some of the Western scholars, they have said that religion is faith. Religion is faith. But dharma is not faith. Dharma is action. Now, when you say religion is faith, it means it can change. Given the circumstances, faith may change. You may shift from one faith to another faith. But dharma, which is action, does not shift. For example, the fluidity of water, जैसे पानी की तरलता होती है ना, या हीट इन फायर, ये उसका धर्म है, आग का उसका धर्म है कि उसमें हीट देना है, उसको उष्मा होनी है। पानी में तरलता उसका धर्म है, ठीक, वो शिफ्ट नहीं होता है, अंडर एनी सर्कमस्टेंसेस वोंट चेंज। सो दैट essence of our actions, the quintessence of our actions is our dharma. So nothing to do with religion as such. It's a different category. But religion is faith. I think when Bhagavad Gita, because I'm again and again referring to Srimad Bhagavad Gita, because to me, Srimad Bhagavad Gita, it answers both. It answers questions on literature. It answers questions on spirituality. So that's a beautiful text. It's a knowledge text which has nothing to do with any caste, creed, religion, or nationality. It's a universal text. And that's why Bhagavad Gita comes into picture, and it answers our questions. Now, one more thing, which takes us to this spirituality, this element of spirituality. Again, I'm using something from Bhagavad Gita. Okay, spirituality tries to take us away from this notion of physicality of being, this idea of being in the physical realm. हिंदी में इसको कहते हैं देहात्म बुद्धि। देहात्म बुद्धि, देहे में होता है शरीर, देहे को सेंटर में रखना, फिजिकलिटी ऑफ बीइंग को सेंटर में रखना। Spirituality tries to disrupt this. That means spirituality tries to, or enables us to liberate us from this idea of देहात्म बुद्धि। और ये जो भौतिक चेतना है, ये जो मटीरियल कॉन्शियसनेस है, इससे लिबरेट करता है। उसी को बोलते हैं स्पिरिचुअल इंपोर्ट ऑफ बीइंग, लिबरेशन फ्रॉम दिस नोशन ऑफ material being or physicality of being. And it takes us to this idea of Shuddha Chetana. Shuddha Chetana means pure consciousness. What is this pure consciousness and impure consciousness? See, the moment we say being, in fact, German philosophers from Husserl to Martin Heidegger, both teacher and student, they grappled with this notion of being and becoming, right, in their idea of phenomenology, right? So this I am, these two words, I am, I think are very important to understand, to have this idea of Shuddha Chetana, pure consciousness, and impure consciousness. When you feel that मैं ही हूं, that means I'm supreme, मैं सर्वे सर्वा हूं, then this is impure consciousness. It is the material being of self. And when you say, or when you say, I am, but I am being a part of the universe around. This idea of universalism or idea of humanism, which even Tagore and Gandhi, they talked about this idea of universalism and humanism. Even a French philosopher, Roma Rolla, right? So when you say that मैं हूं, that means I am part of this entire universe. I think that is pure consciousness. So, and this notion of मैं हूं, that means when you take yourself as something supreme, or when you put yourself in the center and tries to negate everything else, or you become very, very egoistic, or as Hazari Prasad Dwivedi has also said, that Hindi writer in his book भाषा साहित्य और देश, उस किताब में उन्होंने भी कहा है कि man has gained this tendency of putting himself in the center. Means आधुनिक जीवन में मनुष्य ने अपने आप को केंद्र में रख लिया है. ये जो प्रवृत्ति है ना, ये जो एंथ्रोपोसीन की, ये जो एंथ्रोपोजेनिक और एंथ्रोपोसीन की जो ये टेंडेंसी है, I think this is not. Spirituality tries to correct our course of action. It tries to do away with this idea of either मैं ही हूं or putting myself or ourselves in the center. One more thing on, you can say, this idea of self or pure consciousness. I think four, we call them four deformities of human beings, or four evils, necessary evils. Let me call them necessary evils, which we all suffer from. Spirituality would try to answer these four necessary evils. Those evils are, one is we commit mistakes necessarily. We all commit mistakes necessarily. Directly or indirectly, knowingly or unknowingly, we all commit mistakes. We all are necessarily illusioned. That means there are phases in life when we all are illusioned, especially in this material world. We are illusioned with this idea of I. Third, we have the tendency to cheat others. As I said in the beginning, truth is lack or absence of deceit. Anything which directly or indirectly has this element of deceit is not truth. And let us accept this fact. We have this tendency to cheat others. William Golding, on whom I wrote a book, William Golding is a 20th century scholar who got Nobel Prize also. Beautiful novel, Lord of the Flies. William Golding, I wrote a book on this because his idea of evil is very important. What Golding says, is a British novelist. Golding says that human beings produce evil as bees produce honey. Human beings produce evil as bees produce honey. Look at this comparison. Look at this bringing together of human beings and bees. देखिए, बीज का, मधुमक्खी का धर्म है शहद पैदा करना. ये धर्म है उसका, ये उसका असेंशियल एलिमेंट है उसके वजूद में, उसकी एग्जिस्टेंस. लेकिन ह्यूमन बीइंग्स को ये कहना कि they produce evils. Golding said it in the context of 20th century in the context of post-World War. He was a member of British Navy. He was a combatant in British Navy. He saw people being butchered and killed like anything, right? And then he became a headmaster in a school. He was a teacher, then a novelist. So he, out of his experience, he said that evil is inherent in us. It is inherent. We are bound to be. We are bound to cheat others or cheat self, if not others. That is the third deformity. And fourth one is we all are limited because we have no control on our senses. हमारा अपने इंद्रियों पे कंट्रोल नहीं है. So we are limited beings. We claim to be superior, claim to be superhuman beings, claim to be most intelligent species on earth, but we have limited capacity because we don't have control on our own senses. So these are the four deformities or necessary evils which are talked about. And texts like Bhagavad Gita or texts on spiritualism, they do answer, try to take us away from these deformities, or at least offer us a solution to these four deformities. Right? Having said it, let me quote Professor Avdesh Kumar Singh Ji. I'm a great fan of Professor Avdesh Kumar Singh Ji. I heard him talking at different platforms on various aspects of life. And, a lot of my learning took place from his discourses. Professor Singh, he wrote a paper on the future of comparative literary studies. And he quotes Walter Benjamin when he wrote this paper. In his paper, he says, I'm going back to literature. He said, literature is of two types, directive and touching. Directive is which analyzes things with depth or intensity. And touching is which, brings readers or makes readers collaborators, or author becomes a collaborator with the reader and they do it together. That's how literature is written. Further, Professor Singh says that won't be appropriate to use the word literature for Sahitya. He prefers using the word Sahitya, and there is a reason for it. Because Sahitya is a broader category. Sahitya means togetherness. It brings people together. And welfare of people while being together. Welfare of people while being together. Sahit, साथ रह के एक दूसरे का भला. That is Sahitya, right? In fact, even Rabindranath Tagore, in many of his essays and letters, I think it was his essay, The Religion of Man, he gave us two beautiful concepts of Vishwamanav and Vishwa Sahitya. Because Tagore was not in favor of the idea of a nation or the idea of nationalism. He, in fact, intertwined these two words of nationalism and spiritualism. He said, we can accomplish spiritual nationalism rather than accomplishing nationalism. So when he was arguing this kind of a thing, he came up with this idea of Vishwamanav and Vishwa Sahitya. Vishwamanav is, that means this a man who is universal. Means we human beings are universal in our being, not to be limited with any form of categories of caste, creed, or nationalities. That is Vishwamam. That means who thinks of the world. And second was Vishwa Sahitya. Vishwa Sahitya means world literature. Nowadays, in many of the universities, in our MA programs, world literature has come to be a category, come to be a paper. People do include this as one of the courses in MA programs, world literature. But the idea of world literature is literature which has universal appeal, which talks of universalism, right? That was the kind of thing which Tagore was trying to propagate. Now, in order to understand this notion of Anand and this idea of spiritualism, we need to talk about one or more two scholars of Indian origin. One of them is Anand K. Kumaraswamy. Anand K. Kumaraswamy, Coomara. He has contributed immensely to the realm of art, aesthetics, and literature. Now, Anand Kumaraswamy, he said that aesthetics is one of the prime categories of art. In fact, the basic purpose of literature is aesthetics. Aesthetics means what? We may take it as beauty. We may take it as appreciation of beauty. We may take it as something to do with the the idea of having senses on beauty. There could be a number of things on aesthetics, but aesthetics is basically a category in literature which brings in this idea of आनंद. देखिए, आनंद का मतलब है रस. रस का मतलब है, और मीनिंग ऑफ रस इज, जब हम अपने भावों को अनुभव करने लग जाएं, उसको रस कहते हैं. अपने भावों के अनुभवों की अभिव्यक्ति is rasa. That means when you start experiencing your own feelings and sentiments, you get rasa out of it. And when you get rasa, or when you are in a position to experience rasa, I think you accomplish anand. As I said in the beginning, anand has three sources: intellectual, physical, and spiritual. On physical, Bhagavad Gita has very categorically said, इस physicality of being से ही liberate होना है, then only we can have this notion of art. So we are left with two categories: intellectual and spiritual. Now, intellectual and spiritual, दोनों you may say that they complement each other, because in spirituality, the catalyst for Anand is knowledge. And knowledge is capturing the essence of being. That is knowledge. I'm not talking about the practical knowledge of life or knowledge on various things which are available for us to use. Not that kind of a knowledge. Knowledge of self. I think there lies the real idea. As even Adi Shankaracharya, when he was put forth with a question that do you recommend practice of rituals in religion? So Adi Shankaracharya, he took some time to answer this question because he is the greatest thinker on Hinduism. And Adi Shankaracharya has done a lot of work. He did a lot of work in his short span of life of 32 years on the basic tenets of Hinduism. That's why Pavan K. Verma, great intellectual, public intellectual, calls him greatest thinker of Hinduism. Now, when Adi Shankaracharya was put forth with this question, he, do you recommend practice of rituals in religion? So he said, yes, I do. Now, people, those who disagreed, said, how can you recommend rituals? It makes people blind followers, or there is a possibility of exploitation when you recommend rituals. Those agents of God, they may misuse these rituals, right? Yeah, he accepted that, yes, these are the possibilities. It may happen. But he said both are important. Karam Kand and Gyan Kand. Karam Kand is this acceptance of rituals in any religion. And Gyan Kand, which is the more important category, or you can say element of any faith, is Gyan Kand. Rituals will, create a discipline in people. At least they will abide by that philosophy through those rituals. And few enlightened sources using that Gyan mark would try to, enlighten people. You may have a different opinion at this point of time. You may not recommend rituals, but that was Adi Shankaracharya's position on Karam Kand and Gyan Marg, means the idea of rituals and the idea of knowledge. एक चीज और मैं यहाँ पे, because when we talk of Indian spiritual movement, or yeah, Indian spirituality, देखिए ऐसा नहीं है spirituality वेस्ट में नहीं है, ये इंडिया में ही है, ऐसा नहीं बोल सकते हम. I'm no one to dispute one philosophy with the other philosophy, because people have their own ways to do things. But at least I can talk about my philosophy, to which I subscribe. जैसा मैंने भागवत गीता का जिक्र किया, उसी तरह से शिव का जो आइडिया है, देखिए शिव को आप एक आइडिया मान सकते हैं. You can have Shiv as God, you can have Shiv as a philosophy, either way. But Shiv, the idea of Shiv, I think captures this mystic aspect of spirituality. Tandav Nritya of Shiv, when you analyze Tandav Nritya of Shiv, I think it captures two things. It is a juxtaposition of dance and death. नृत्य और मृत्यु दोनों का सामंजस्य है तांडव. Celebration of dance and death. That's how we take it. That means, now, if some of you are aware of Lal Dead, that Kashmiri Shaivite, Laleshwari, the only figure, I think, to my knowledge, there could be more, but as far as I know, Laleshwari is acceptable with great reverence to both Hindus and Muslims in Kashmir. Muslims call her Lal Dead, Hindus call her as Laleshwari. That 14th century mystic saint, a great propounder of Kashmir Shaivism, I think is a beautiful example of spiritual recourse to life. And this Kashmiri or Kashmir Shaivism through Lal in fact, composed work, they call it works. And in her works, you find beautiful description of life, beautiful lessons of life, which we all can imbibe or subscribe to. And Kashmir Shaivism brings in this idea of Shiv. Using Shiv means celebrating Shiv and celebrating this idea of Mrit and Mritu. Kashmir Shaivism talks of universalism. It talks of, trying to understand self through surroundings, trying to understand this notion of non-duality, which Shankaracharya later on gave us in the form of Advaita, philosophy of Advaita, non-duality. That means there is no distinction between me and the person in front of me. In fact, there is a story behind. Let me see. Yeah, there is a story. I think I'll stop. Belu ma'am, please give me a hint when I'm supposed to stop.
I think
Okay.
we are nearing the time. So if you can just wind it up in a couple of minutes, so we have 5-10 minutes for questions.
Sure, ma'am. Sure. I'll take a few more minutes. In fact, when Adi Shankaracharya was going to Banaras Ghat in Varanasi, so when he was going there, he met a Chandal on his way. And when Chandal came in his way, so jo Shankaracharya ke disciples the, they tried to do him away or try to clear the path for Shankaracharya. Chandal suddenly asked Shankaracharya, Shankaracharya ji, you only say that we all are one. That essence of God or that element or that part of God is in all of us. So how can I be impure or how can I be different from you? So I think that jolted Shankaracharya, and he stopped and said, yes, an excellent question, excellent discourse. I think from there, this idea of non-duality, and later on expanded to Atma and Paramatma, that but the idea of Advaita, the idea of non-duality basically means we all are one, and let us go and immerse ourselves into this idea of Paramatma. Lastly, because I don't have time, but if given at some point of time, I would like people to read Ralph Waldo Emerson, that American philosopher. If you really want to understand Indian spiritualism, Emerson, though an American, did an excellent work on Indian spiritualism. Another, I would like Romarola, that French philosopher who is a contemporary of Rabindranath Tagore. Romarola, he gave this idea of oceanic sensibility. And Romarola did talk about Indian way of spirituality because he had a lot of discussions and arguments with Tagore, and both they agreed on certain aspects of spirituality. If you find some time, do read Romarola, do read Emerson, and as I said, Kashmir Shaivism. If you find time, read Laleshwari, Lalte. I think that would answer all your questions. Lastly, let me quote Aurobindo to sum up my discussion. Aurobindo said, our ideal of Swaraj involves no hatred of any other nation. Our ideal of Swaraj involves no hatred of any other nation. Our ideal of patriotism proceeds on the basis of love and brotherhood and envisages the unity of mankind. But there is a rider. Aurobindo further says, but it is a unity of brothers, equals, and free men that we seek, not the unity of master and serf, of devourer and devoured. So he was asking for a sense of equality and brotherhood when he said it. To conclude, maybe 2 seconds to conclude my talk with Bharat ka Vyaktitva. I am leaving you with 4 points on the idea of India in the context of spirituality and literature. Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vantanti. It simply means हम सभी मार्गों को सत्य मानकर उनका सम्मान करते हैं. This was by Vivekanand in his speech at Chicago. Second, विविधता के मूल में ही एकता की अनुभूति by Tagore. Unity in diversity by Tagore. प्रत्येक व्यक्ति में ईश्वर का अंश by आदि शंकराचार्य. Lastly, प्रत्येक व्यक्ति को मुक्ति का मार्ग, मोक्ष का मार्ग चुनने का उसका अपना अधिकार. Nobody can dictate terms. I think that's what this idea of Bharat ka Vyakti. This is in the essence of this idea of India, which can be really understood in a better manner through this spirituality and literature argued in the context of Indic thought. Let me say, I'm thankful to SAILC and Auro University for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Raviji. Thank you so much. It was quite, broadly explained and connected with so many aspects and attributes of different kind of literature, and not only national level, but you brought Roma Rolla and other scholars. The last, the way you sum up, it communicates whole, whatever you presented, communicates very well the depth of your talk. So I'm really thankful. The summing up is like, it is very touching point, because actually उसी से समझ में आता है कि साहित्य क्या है और साहित्य कैसा होना चाहिए. मैंने जब as a student of literature, when I asked this question कि actually अच्छा साहित्य कौन सा होता है, because being a student you start with child literature, and then being a young you read kind of cheap literature, and then classic literature comes to the picture gradually. So I asked rather my father, he was a professor of literature, comparative literature, so he said लिटरेचर वो होता है जो समय से परे आपको ले जाए, मतलब उसको कोई बंधन ना हो, टाइमलेस, उसकी जो विचारधारा हो वो ह्यूमैनिटी, मतलब मानवता के लिए हो, सुख के लिए हो, साहित्य मतलब सबका हित चाहे वैसा. तो एंड देन इवन जो आपने जो इसमें आध्यात्मिकता की जो बात की थी, मतलब उसके अंदर हमारा आत्मन समाहित हो, मतलब हम खुद उसमें हों, एक रूपता ले आए, जो भी हमारा जीवन बाहर दिखाई देता है और अंदरूनी दिखाई देता है उससे. उसके बाद मुझे प्रेमचंद समझ में आने लगे, कबीर समझ में आने लगे, तुलसी समझ में आने लगे, क्योंकि जो बाहरी रूप है, जो प्रकृति का रूप है, जैसे क्रिएटिविटी जो आप कहते हैं, वो हमें आकर्षित करता है, वो हमारे अंदर एस्थेटिक सेंस रिफाइन करता है, लेकिन जो कनेक्ट करने वाला जो धागा है वो आध्यात्मिकता का धागा है. जब आप वननेस फील करते हैं उसके साथ, जब कभी कुछ कहता है, सो वो वननेस की भावना जब आती है, तो वो साहित्य हमको अपनी कहीं और अलग ट्रांसेंड करता है या ट्रांसपोर्ट करता है. आई थिंक आपकी बातों में मुझे वही चीज नजर आई, काफी समय के बाद लिटरेचर के बारे में सुना. आई एम रियली थैंकफुल दैट यू केम एंड एक्सप्लेन दिस थिंग. थैंक यू सो मच. Deluji, over to you.
Yeah, very delightful, Raviji. I just wish we had longer, because there were so many points I wanted to kind of have a little exchange of ideas with you, starting from the post-truth. And I recalled how I felt first time I came across this term. Said, what the heck is this, What is post-truth?
Yes.
So like those kinds of things. So, but there was one very specific thing as a student of Sri Aurobindo, which I noticed when you were, I think, referring to William Golding's idea on human tendency to create these evils as the bees produce honey, kind of like that. And I was reminded of Sri Aurobindo, the poet, Sri Aurobindo, the literature. And, you know, in this beautiful little poem called Life, titled Life, he speaks of these 4 lines are one of my favorites. I mean, everything that he's right can be your favorite. Even in rags, I am a god. Fallen, I am divine. High, I triumph when downtrodden. Long, I live when slain.
Beautiful.
So even in rags, I am a god. I think so much depends on, when you were speaking of Indian spirituality, how we understand who I am or what I am, you know, what is a human being in a sense, what is human experience. Yes, we have a tendency to create evil like the bees, but we are not bees. We are separate from bees. You know, a human is not a tiger. So when a tiger kills, that is tiger's dharma. But when a human being kills, that is not human's dharma. And yet, in Bhagavad Gita, Shri Krishna tells Arjun, go and kill. So, I mean, when we juxtapose these things, this is where we find the real beauty of what literature can provide, whether it is that, you know, the truth, literature that takes us to truth, or literature that brings the hit of community together, the sahitya. So, I mean, there were so many thoughts that you kind of, you know, your talk brought out. And again, you know, Tagore and the nationalism, spiritual nationalism, and how it is different from Sri Aurobindo's, the last quote that you read out. You know, again, this is something he wrote in 1908, much before many others started talking about critiquing nationalism as such. So what that means, I mean, there were just so many threads you left. So I don't think 1 hour was enough, but still, thank you so much for bringing the rasa through this session. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Raviji. There are some questions by one of the participants, but what I'll do is, like today we are quite late. What I'll do, I'll just, you know, copy paste in my file, and then I'll post it. And maybe, you know, in next session, whenever you are coming, I think you will.
Yeah, sure. I'll try to answer.
Great. Thank you so much, Raviji. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.